Be up and on? Because if they are, I wouldn't want them to miss the presentation. Okay, good.
Hey, Cheryl, I just found these again, so I'll pull them out. Unless you want to enter them now.
Okay, yeah, good morning. Sandy Wheels, thank you very much for being here today. We have a check for the Horizon Health and Wellness. It's Supervisor Klein and I, but you're more than welcome to be part of the picture. And so anyway, if you'd like to come up, we'd like to present you a check, and we'd like to get a picture of this. We're presenting a check for $1,000 this morning.
Thank you all very much.
So you got another $1,000 coming? What you saying? All right. See there? This is your lucky day. All you gotta do is ask. All you gotta do is ask. Yeah.
Thank you so much. You guys have been.
You bet. Yeah. We like
Thank
to
you
help.
so
Thank
much.
you, and look for District 1.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, he will earn the picture, right?
Thank you so much. Happy holidays.
Hey, whether it's now or later, it's all good, huh? It's all good. But you don't get any money, Tom, I'm sorry.
Well, we didn't we do that last meeting?
What's that?
Vote money for the,
Yeah, you already did.
yeah,
Gave you money?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
perfect, I guess. You're just ahead of your time. I guess so, huh?
yeah. And I guess Uncle Sam took quite a bit of that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good morning, everyone. I would like to start today's meeting. I'll call to order this meeting work session, Tuesday, November 30th at 10 a.m. Supervisor Klein, Christensen, and Humphrey are all in Globe. And Tom, since you're here, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this work session today, regular agenda item information discussing regarding updates on ordinance number 11-03, Gila County street naming and property numbering. Mr. Tom Holman. In this work session, you have a presentation.
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, and board, at any time there's questions, please ask them so we can help Tom get a direction with where we're going and want to go with doing some changing to this. And so, and Tom, if you feel we're not asking the right questions, prompt us to ask the right questions to help give you a direction.
Absolutely, sir. I will.
Okay, all right, then let's get this started.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Let me get this going. So the last time this ordinance came before the board was 2011, and they're in a recent GIS presentation, you asked me to address the question of assigning addresses to vacant lots. In doing review for this process, there were several other pain points that I felt needed to be addressed. Now then, the ordinance is an object of the Board of Supervisors that we operate under. So this presentation is geared towards the items that I've identified and I want your input to see if you feel they merit making advancement on. From the output of this, we will work on the red line of the ordinance and then bring that back to you at a future date.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
It does.
All right. So the ordinance has been around since 1991. Prior to that, the fire departments were responsible for assigning addresses within the communities. At that time, community development organized or was the first champion of this ordinance, and largely it's to support computerized addressing for 911 dispatch. The opening preamble, to paraphrase, our ordinance is to assign addresses to structure for efficient 911 response. And, you know, staying in that historical 1991, if you think about it, back then there were no cell phones. So if you didn't have a house, CenturyLink or whoever the local telco was couldn't run a phone number, or so there was no need for an address to be assigned to pick up the phone call to call 911. Because without a structure, you couldn't have a telephone. I don't think CenturyLink hung them on trees inside of little boxes.
Right.
Squirrels don't pay the bills.
Right.
So fast forward, you know, cell phones are now a big part of our environment. And the traditional copper phone line is working its way away. You know, just as a matter of statistics, in 2013, we had 12,850 telephone numbers actively on the books. As of last year, we only had 8,271. So we've seen a almost 1/3 drop in 7 years in the number of landline telephone numbers. That's important for 911 because I have to certify to the state every year through the sheriff's office that our 911 response meets a 98% accuracy rate. So since cell phones they work off location more so than the billing address. I mean, a member of your family could provide you a cell phone that has a number back in Baltimore, Maryland. So the location becomes much more relevant as opposed to the actual physical address. And through the years, addressing has been at times in the sheriff, in public works. It's been in public works twice, and emergency management for a decade. Any questions on that for the background?
Supervisor Christensen, question?
No, I don't.
Supervisor Klein?
So then, Tom, you know, seeing a decline in the actual landlines, in the way that our technology is going with the GPS system or whatever it is, however, I guess it's GPS system that's set up out there. When it comes to that system and cell phones or locations, are we going to end up having, I would think we'll end up having even less landlines as we go forward, would be my guess.
Presumably.
And then so with the advancement of cell phones, are we looking at our system still being able to accommodate all this modern technology from now on, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. When a 911 call comes in, the location is transmitted to the dispatch center, and that is plotted on a map. So for the purposes of 911, the address is actually purely inferred at the beginning of the call. Once the dispatcher gets on the line, they will establish the actual location and the need of the call So that is a verification step in their process.
Okay.
Because the cell phone will come back as the phone number plus the location
Okay,
with GPS coordinates.
gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. So, there's an couple of administrative sections that I'm looking at proposing to remove. Well, the Article 5 of the ordinance is all the definitions. If it's okay with the board, I would like to move that off to an appendix, because it's my understanding from an ordinance perspective, if there's changes to definitions, it's easier to update an appendix, kind of a referential document, as opposed to the primary document. You know, the primary document requires the typical public hearing, and, you know, anybody here, please correct me if I'm wrong on that notion. But kind of like fees are typically associated as a separate appendix, and it's easier to update fees. I'm looking at moving the definitions, because the definitions have been in place 2 revisions, and some of them are just flat wrong. So, but I'd like to move those out so I can do more maintenance on them and provide better definitions into the document without the larger public hearing, if that's possible. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom, yeah, I think that's a good idea, actually, to move it. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with that either, Tom. I think that makes sense, you know, and I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but when give me an example of definitions that would be problematic.
Here, let me bring up the ordinance. Let's see here. Let's make this full width. So this is the original. This is the current ordinance in force, signed by Chairman Pastor back in 2011. And Article 5, the definitions. This block numbering system, Section 501, talks about the software. Well, a block numbering system really isn't in use here, but like back east, you hear of the 500 block, the 600
Oh, yeah.
block
Right.
of a neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we don't use that. We use ranging, so that says, okay, the start of the
I
neighborhood
gotcha.
is 1,000, the end is 1,099, and the address will be proportioned along that line. But then it says the block numbering system is the software. And like, no, that the numbering is a methodology, not a piece of software.
I got you.
So it's just a gross error.
Okay. No, I understand now. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Sorry, I'm cheating a little bit. The computer that's doing the presentation can't handle my software. So I'm remoting into my desktop back over in Public Works. So I may dance back and forth a little.
Are you more advanced at Public Works than we are in the courthouse, Tom?
May I decline to answer?
Yes,
that
there's the manager.
question? My boss says yes.
That's good to know.
So returning to the presentation, I think I can click the right button there. The thoroughfare designations. If you think about down in Phoenix, you know, all the avenues are on the west side of Phoenix, all the streets are on the east side. Similarly, you know, there's a very formal and rigid process. We have those definitions as Article 6, and that says, you know, circle should be a generally circular route, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, no one has ever paid attention to them. So unless you're going to authorize me to upset the constituents by readdressing to come into conformance, I'm proposing that we remove the article entirely, because we're not following it. It's a matter of preference. Again, flopping over here in Article 6 on the ordinance, Section 601 says a boulevard is a medium with a median. Well, I don't think we have too many streets in the counties that have raised medians. I mean, there are a few. Fairgrounds Road, for one. There is a divided median, well, raised bed in there, but we didn't call it Fairgrounds Boulevard. We called it Fairgrounds Road. So these don't really apply to us. We don't have any highways. We don't have any interstates. So those sections would never be applicable to the county. And if you move down further, a lane is a reduced right-of-way branching from courts, places, or ways. Since we're not following that, and is there a relevance to retain it, to ignore it, or is it better to do we want to grandfather everything and then move forward and say we will follow this moving forward? Or do we go with the status quo as we are today? We don't have many roads coming in. We do have, a couple of them a year. So we aren't doing a lot of road naming, but it is happening. So looking for your guidance on that.
Supervisor Christensen?
Thank you. I think that makes sense to me. I didn't realize there was such an ordinance as this that lays out what a court path, trail, road, thoroughfare, boulevard. I didn't know we had all those. And if we have not been following that, then I don't see why we should even have it in there. I don't see how it would even matter whether you called something a lane or not.
Yeah. At this point, typically our workflow is look at the surrounding areas and then lane, roadway. What sounds good with the name more so than, well, looking at place. It's according to the ordinance, that places should be north-south running roads. We haven't followed them.
Okay. Supervisor Glenn, questions or comments on that?
Oh, just a comment. I think you're on the right track, Tom. If we can take it out of there, let's do it and not tie our hands behind our back.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's, kind of where I'm at too, just as our building codes. We adopt building codes because we're not able to write our own building codes. And I think we adopted these ordinances as we have, because they're ordinances that were made by somebody else that we adopted, that our foot does not fit that shoe.
Yes.
And so any ordinances that we are not able to adhere to or find beneficial to our rural Arizona, I don't know why we should have them, and especially if we're not complying to them. So, to me, that would be a ditto on anything going forward in the ordinances adopted that don't apply.
Thank you, sir.
And back to you.
All right. So that was kind of the administrative section. I was looking at a bulk section deletion. Let's get out of my PC and back over to the presentation. So now we're moving into the specific changes. And I want to save the addressing vacant land for the last because it's kind of the deepest topic, potentially, and might have the most discussion. So, Section 806A, we've run into a response deadlock problem that I had to go to Jessica with the county attorney's office for an opinion. The way our ordinance is currently written, when we involve the constituents to name a road, we have to meet a 75% approval rate. Now then, a non-response cannot be considered either way. If the three of you are adjacent property owners, you all have to respond. For me, I would have to get 100% response and agreement in order to take that to the board. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chair, if I may. So let me make sure my mind's headed the right way here on this one, Tom. So what you're saying by 75% response would be, let's say you're going to name or the people are going to name a road that services so many people down this particular road where their driveways duck off and things like that.
Right.
So then 75% of those owners along that road would have to agree.
Correct.
Okay.
So in your case with Cooper Ridge that's off Mail
Right.
Trail, there were 4 lots. There was a minor land division that created an access
Right.
easement with 4 lots. And so off Mail Trail, we can address the 2 front lots off Mail Trail. But the 2 back lots are sort of tied into the background. So by naming that access easement and accepting that the corner lots could go either direction, we had to get 3 out of the 4 to agree. Now
Right.
then, all 4 property owners were the same family,
Yeah.
so they were already in agreement.
Right, but I could see where that would be an issue.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in Tonto Basin with Madero Way that we also just recently, at the last public hearing named, that started back in March. And that's where we ended up going to Ms. Cavelli to get the opinion, because of the 5 property owners, there were 2 people that would never respond. And we were sending registered letters. We would get the green card back, so they did receive the mail, but they would never put in a response. So based on the opinion off the county attorney, we couldn't accept that anyway, so we had to keep going. Now then, under a registered mail, the normal workflow we're using is when we send it out, we give it a week for it to get through the mail. Then we give them 2 weeks to respond, either, preferably in writing. So every mailing is a automatic 3-week extension of a road naming process. So what I'm looking to do at this point is to say, okay, the first time going out, we will accept it. If you are a non-responder, or if you do not respond on this, if we do not meet the 75% and have to move to a second response or second round of mailing, if you do not respond again, we are going to consider you with no objection. If you want to be involved in the process, be involved in the process, because in this process, we've had people say, when we finally found a phone number for them or something and were able to contact them, they said, well, we assumed that no response meant we did not agree. Well, the ordinance doesn't say that, so I could not interpret it in either fashion.
It makes sense, majority, or after no response a second time, that you don't even count.
Yeah.
Which would go back to majority, so
Is that a fair diplomatic process and worthy of advancement in your eyes?
I would think that would be a question to ask the attorney, but it's fair in my eyes.
Well, and that
Because if we get in trouble over it, that's the one we
Right.
got to talk to.
well, at this point, these are the ideas, and
Right.
based on the
Sure.
red lines, obviously, then the
Sure.
review process will
Sure.
have to hammer things out.
Supervisor Klein, go ahead.
I absolutely agree. If somebody doesn't want to take the time to just drop an email or respond in a simple form fashion, then I think, take them off the list and they don't count towards or against that 75%. I mean, that's my opinion. And by doing that, I could see where that would alleviate a lot of time as far as far as your response and all that.
Yeah, and that's going to count, like, when we get into vacant land addressing, there could be 40 acres. And if a developer comes in and wants to develop the majority of that, then, yeah, that's going to make a big difference, because that property owner could probably change the names of roads just because he's bringing in the majority of people. But that's okay.
Correct.
As long as we deal with it this way.
Correct. And even the minor land developers, even the small developers that break down a 10-acre lot,
Right.
if, you broke down your lot, at one point, the lot has been split, but you are still the owner of all 5 pieces.
Right.
If you make the petition before you start selling off the chunks,
Right.
we can reach the threshold very easily.
Right.
But once property sales start happening,
Well,
then it becomes a challenge.
yeah, but that's way down the road. And then that could be an ordinance change that needs to become in front of the board 20 years from now. But I
No,
think,
it happened at your meeting in Tonto Basin.
right.
So
But yeah, I still think majority, or if no response, then you're not even one of the 5 if you
Right.
don't care to respond.
correct. I'm not going to exclude you the first go around, but if you don't respond and then you don't respond on the second, I'm hoping there's language where we can say that you are a no objection type
So,
property owner.
so my question would be, if we did that and say, and maybe the first go around, everybody knows that they need to be a part of this, and if you're not going to count. So why would there be even a second round? Especially when you're getting the notices back that they received it in the mail, it's certified, so you get the copy back saying they've got it, or email, whatever it is. And so, to me, it's like, well, I don't have a lot of patience for that, I guess is what I'm saying, Tom. I think we all have we should have an opportunity to be a part of what's going on. But if you just choose not to do it for whatever reason, that's fine. We're going to go on without you.
Right.
And so,
I've gone back and forth, and I'm honestly looking for your opinion on that. My original thought was, if you don't respond on the first one, you're not going to be a non-respond. But I wanted to give people the benefit of the doubt of, hey, maybe the mail was picked up or misdelivered or whatever. I guess I'm trying to make it a gentle democratic process as opposed to the one and done. Is democracy gentle?
Go ahead. I think Supervisor Christensen has a comment.
go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to bring that up, Supervisor Klein. It should be a one and done, in my opinion. If it's registered or certified, we know that they received it, and that if they don't respond, it should be considered part of the 75% that is approving. Okay?
Okay.
That's my thoughts.
Okay.
Not just out of the count, but counting toward a positive response. No objection means I don't object. So,
Okay.
So by doing this, Tom, what kind of time do you think that would save? What's the time frame it'd shorten up?
For Madera Way, in Tonto Basin, it would have cut 3 months off.
Wow.
We had to go 3 rounds before we could finally get 75%.
See, that's huge.
Yeah, especially when you're developing and you're wanting to do something before winter comes, and all of a sudden you're in the middle of the winter before you get, yeah.
Right. And these were interior lots, so I could not, so if you come down the backside of Tonto Basin, down Klein, and then I forget what road it is, but we could not logically access or address off Klein because there was no legal easement. So we had no choice but to continue this.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go
Not to
ahead.
belabor this further, but could I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Tom, when a developer comes and wants to subdivide a piece of property, or there's, like you said, an example where there's four, but all four were family members, they'd already decided the name of the street that they wanted to include. What is the percentage of that come in and they've already identified or specified the street name that the homeowners want versus they're just coming to the county and the county's coming up with the name?
90% of the petitions come with pre-existing names. There's only been one that came up empty.
And Mr. Chairman, the 90%, there's not really any issue. They've got it, they've requested it, and so in the past that's come to the board and the board has gone with what the request has been.
Yes, there's been some administrative deferrals. For example, in El Capitan between here and Hayden Winkleman, somebody wanted to name the road four-wheel drive, a tongue-in-cheek type thing, and that was administratively denied.
Okay. Thank you.
Must have been one we maintained.
No, sir.
Oh, okay. That's
No,
good
sir.
to know.
Okay, we clear on that one?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, Tom,
So
go
you're-
on.
So you're good with the one and done
I-
scenario, and I will explore that.
I believe this board likes the one and done, yes.
All right.
Yes.
Just for clarification, so one and done, is their non-response going to be construed as an approval? They're not objecting, or are we going to narrow it down to having the 100% be those residents who have responded?
I would think, in my opinion, that if they don't care to respond, they don't even count. They're not one of the, if there's 10 of them and 2 of them don't respond, then there's only 8.
But we may be putting ourselves in a bind if we have houses that are opposing the name change, whereas an objection, if they're not responding, they're not wanting to be a part of the process. So if you're indicating that in the letter, you're giving ample notice to them that it would be construed as an approval, then they could increase that 75% if you need it.
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Christians.
So if we look at a scenario of 4 people, let's say we have 4 property owners, and one of them does not respond, and we eliminate them out of the pool, that has now increased the intensity of the vote to become 100% unanimous.
To the people
Correct.
that care to respond.
For the 3 respondents, all 3 would have to be approved because 2 would be 66%.
Because you can respond negatively or positively. It's just asking for a response, correct?
Correct.
So if you choose not to respond, then you just don't count one way or the other.
That's correct. So, to you,
I just believe that might create an additional burden to achieve the 75% versus counting the non-response as a positive response. Am I looking at that incorrectly?
I think I'm understanding your math now then for going back to Supervisor Humphrey's, 10 property owners. If 2 decline to respond, then you've got the remaining 80%. Do you want to keep the 75% of the property owners to avoid, like you say, intensifying the ratio?
Yeah, I think it would intensify the ratio. Let's say not only 2 responded, let's bump that up to 4. Now you have 6 people left, and you have to meet 75% of 6 rather than 75% of 10.
Right.
That's my point.
Mr. Chair, my question would be to Jessica is, where's the safest way to go with this? Looking
at it now, I think the county, the way the policy is written, we're binding ourselves to rules that we don't need to comply with
Right.
as far as statewide rules. So if we're looking at the scenario that Supervisor Christensen was just bringing up, if there's 4 houses, we don't get a response from one, then that's going to indicate each house is going to be 33.33%. If we get 2 yeses, that's going to be 66.66%. We're not at the 75% threshold. So again, we're going to be putting ourselves in a bind. I think the safest way practically would be to indicate on the notice that if they don't respond, it's going to be construed as an approval. But, you know, either way, the choice is yours. It's nothing that, there's no law saying that you need to comply with that. It's completely your choice and how you feel it would work for our county.
Yeah, but I mean, where I am, okay, say you were sick and your daughter took the mail and didn't respond to the mail. So why should you get a positive or a negative out of that either way? I think you should just not count, because there is scenarios where if you brand it, if you don't respond, you're positive, or if you don't respond, you're negative. Then you're adding to the count and may have not had an opinion.
I could understand that. As far as service goes, it is deemed that someone was served upon receipt of an email. It is deemed received if they receive a certified registered letter. So that could be part of the policy.
But if they don't respond to that letter, then why should we give them a yay or a nay?
It looks to me like the part that we're really up against is the state requirement of 75%.
There is no state, now, if I may interject, there is no state guidelines that this document follows, where like the building for community development, the zoning ordinance is largely driven by the fire code.
Okay.
There is nothing that this ordinance stands up against in this context. This is purely the approval of the board.
Okay, so if we just said the majority of the property owners want to do it, we're done. If that's the case, correct? That's easy. Send out the deals, the majority rules, we're on our way.
I'm good with that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Minley.
I'm sorry. From an auditor, one of the hats from 3 or 4 lifetimes ago, the non-response can be defined in any way that you want to. And as an auditor, if we define that as no response equals a positive response, then that's what it can be. Just depends on how it's defined. And that's what I believe Jessica has been telling us, is that however we define a non-response, that is acceptable, that is legal, and that's what we can go with.
Right.
So,
But that's why I'm saying, and we can also not define it. If you don't respond, it means nothing. It means you just don't care.
however it's defined in the ordinance.
But really, if it's just a basic majority rules, there may only be 2 properties on the street. One of them doesn't talk about,
Yeah,
but
but
the one is a majority, so it's good, right?
I mean, if you send out 10 and only 1 responds, that's not the majority of the 10, unless you want to somehow label the others, where if the others don't count at all, and you get 1 response, well, that 1 response wins because the others didn't care enough to have a yay or nay.
Which I think you could on a majority type situation. I mean, whenever you put numbers to it, it ties hands.
Yes.
That's what it does. And so when you just say in your letter up front, majority of the property owners will be the deciding factor of whatever it is, right?
But they have to respond.
They have to respond, which that's fine. That's good. That may make more people actually become involved with it. one way or another.
That's kind of where I was getting, is to make people responsible for their own actions, and instead of us making them responsible for a response or non-response. You know, that, to me, I would just soon, they have to step up to the plate or they just don't count.
Supervisor Christensen, or I'm sorry, Chairman Humphrey.
That's okay.
So I'm just trying to think of hypotheticals. Going off of the 4, if we don't receive 2 responses, we receive 1 negative and 1 positive. We now have 50-50 if we're not going to count the 2 who did not respond. I'm just trying to come up with a way to not put ourselves in a situation where we don't have a response and now we're going to have to reach out to other residents numerous times. In that hypothetical, we wouldn't be able to address and change that.
Well, in that as well too, is if we send it out to 10 people and 5 respond negatively and 5 respond positively, everybody responds, then we'd put ourselves in that same predicament.
That's true.
But at least they stood up and said how they felt, instead of us making them feel whatever.
Agreed. I don't think we can handle everything to a simple response. I mean, look at our voting system. If you and a opponent came to a dead tie, there would probably be a runoff election. There's something in law for that.
But that's what I say. If we run into a deal, then we have another.
We send it out again.
We send it out again.
I think that would be a very marginal case.
That could be where the second notice comes into play.
Correct.
If you're in a situation where you don't get your answer with that first response, whether you decide to indicate that the non-responses are a negative or they don't count or they're a positive, however you guys decide to do that, the second notice could be advising residents that it would be construed a certain way if they don't respond to the second time.
Or if there's a dead tie twice, the board makes the decision.
Correct.
I mean, you know, either way. So if you don't vote, or if you do vote and there's a 50-50, then we mail it out again. And then from that point on, it becomes a board decision and comes before the board, to where the board could get with the constituents and see how they want to go with it. Perhaps.
Or we could just make up our own minds.
Oh, yeah, right.
You know, I can see that happening. You know, all it takes is a little squabble on a neighborhood and things go south.
But that's why we're here, is to
That's
make
right.
decisions. So if the public ends up in a tie, well, hello.
Yeah.
Bring it to the board.
I'm good.
We'll figure out whether it should be Green Tree or Fallen Leaf Road. Here you go.
Okay.
Then no, that's good.
Next.
Well, on that light topic,
And you say it's going to get deeper as we go further.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, we'll break for lunch. Go ahead.
I got to be out of San Carlos at 1, so you'll have to finish without me. One of the things I was exploring, so when you gave me the direction to move forward on the vacant lots, I reached out to all the other counties just to understand, well, yes, this is Gila County and we do things our own way. We have that power, we have that choice. There are a number of counties that the board road naming is not a public hearing type event, but handled at the administrative level. You know, the addressing official or their designee. You know, I would suggest, you know, if we wanted to head that way, I don't know which way you would prefer to go. Do you prefer, because it does, the work up to a public hearing is a timed process, you know, 3 weeks on, if you follow the schedule as it's posted, it's a 3-week event from the time the public notice, and then And it's actually longer because I want in the public notice, there's a time point where you can dissent. So I want to have the public notice dissension period to be before the start of the agenda quick period. That way it can be tabled administratively rather than come and go, we've got a problem, we need to table the public hearing. So I try to do my workflow. So really naming a road is a minimum of about a 6-week process. Now then, if we there are ways we can shortcut some of those, but following the rules as the rules are written, it's approximately a 6-week process. So one other thing I was looking to speed that up is to, the previous item for the road naming, move to a faster cycle, and then this would allow, changing in this way would allow, say, the Public Works Director or their designee to, if there is no contention, can we administratively go, we approve this name, the name of this road? The road name would still become a recorded document to help title companies. What is the pleasure of the board? Do you prefer to remain involved in the public hearing naming process? Or would you be willing to accept that, hey, in the absence of contention, it can be handled administratively?
Yeah,
if there's contention, then it would come to the public hearing process.
Okay, I have a question. Where would they get their, if it was to staff, where would they get their information on naming a road? Would they pull it out of their pocket? Would they consult with the public that's in the area? Because you're asking me to approve them to do something, but where are they getting their information from?
They would be informed from the early road petition and the naming, the item we just talked about. So if the residents can, the property owners can come to a named consensus, as opposed to transitioning into the public hearing 3-week process, could your designee administratively approve the road name? And because it's not uncommon to see a minor land division, that property is sold and the people are into community development 2 days later looking to build a new home, and all of a sudden I put a screeching halt on things because I can't assign an address.
Well, yeah, no, I'll reach out to the other supervisors, but as long as there's no problem, I don't see in creating one. So if the developer and the people are happy with the road names, I would think staff could say, okay, let's run it through, rather than the board having to deal with it unless it becomes a problem. But Supervisor Christensen or Klein, do you have a response on? Well, that would make it shorter, correct? And
yes.
And easier for a developer or a land division to go through. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, the land division went through, but naming it for permitting for construction is where the holdup is.
And it doesn't come before the board unless they have an issue with.
Correct.
Yeah, we want it Bluebird instead of Blackbird, then it got to come to us.
Right.
Okay. Supervisor Christensen, Supervisor Klein?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with the chairman. I think the proposed change is a good thing on uncontested names. Yeah.
Supervisor Klein?
Whatever we can do to make it shorter and easier for the people, I'm all for. But I do have a question,
Sure.
Tom. So the dissent process, would that still apply?
Yes.
So we're still looking at a time frame. So like if we put in for addressing and everybody agrees and everything, and I walk into your office and say I'm here for my address, you're still going to give me a time frame that I have to wait, right?
If the road is unnamed and there's no logical legal access to the property from another road, then yes, we have to go through the naming process. And, based on our democratic principles, as adjacent property owners, I want to give each of you the opportunity to move forward with a given name.
And what's the time frame on that?
Typically, it's about 3 weeks, because if we send out the registered letters with the petition, typically, you just split the lot, you're the new owner, and, you want to name it Woody Way. I would reach out, then we would research who the adjacent property owners are, and we would send out the petition, registered mail, to say, you two gentlemen, do you approve of that road name? And if there's no contention, or we meet the threshold without contention, then we can move forward. But if there's another Greenleaf Road, then we have to go through that cycle until we can reach a threshold.
So, what's our avenue to get around that? 3 weeks.
Temporary.
Because this is the thing. I mean, and I'm really pressing you on this a little
Yeah,
bit because this is what I like. I like streamlining processes
Understood.
within the legalities, and Jessica will throw something at me if I'm wrong. But so I'm just sitting there thinking, so if somebody puts in a road deal, everything's good, they walk in your office and want to do this just to find out, well, you're still going to wait 3 weeks. That's going to come back to us.
Yes, sir, it will. And yes, sir, it has.
Yes.
The only way would be to remove, and Homero, you might be able to speak better to this with your involvement from Navajo County. My understanding is they had an administrative list of approved road names, and then those could be assigned from there. So if there was a squabble process, and I saw this in Mojave County as well, if we can't come to a consensus, then the addressing department says we need to move forward, here's the name that's being assigned, I'm sorry. It removes the democratic process that I'm trying to retain. But yeah, government's rarely fast.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of opportunities we would have to do something like this because I've seen it. You're right, and I've dealt with it, and and then we do things to streamline processes to help, but yet we're still, which is a plus. We went from 6 weeks to 3 weeks, basically. My biggest question is just how do we get it to everything's good, the names are good. We walk into Steve's office, Steve signs it, and I walk out with an address, and I call Home Depot, and they deliver the next day.
If only it worked that easy.
Well, that's what I'm here to try and find out, is if there's an avenue for it to work that easily.
Right.
And this is the perfect time to do it. We're talking about a policy, and we're talking about all this, so this is something that really...
Right. If there's a way we can administratively accelerate that process, I'm open to ideas, absolutely.
But I don't see that there's any faster way to get the consensus of all the people, because if you walk in and want something and don't include your neighbors, I don't see it happening.
Right. Now, ideally, it would be a case of you want to name the road and your neighbor, you know your neighbors, but how often, part of Madera Way, that was a family thing, but that there was an Eden Lane that has not come to you, and at this point it is a dead road name because 3 of the 5 property owners were one, and there were 2 brothers that were adamantly opposed and would never approve the name as requested.
Okay, so let me re-ask my question again. Maybe we're not on the same page. 5 property owners, new road, they all agree. This is the name. They take one of the 5, and that person, whoever it may be, walks into your office and says, we all agree.
If they have a petition that shows all 5 signatures with their parcel name, if they have the signed petition that they all agree to this name, then it would become an administrative process. And
So Steve would sign the papers and they would walk out with an address.
yes,
Okay. So the discontent part would just be basically if somebody didn't agree or whatever, and then you go through the rest of it, right?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if
So-
everything's 100%, it becomes an easy process. Right now, there's just some of the political process that chews up the time.
Okay. So, and I'm kind of going back with I kind of, maybe it's not fair to compare it to this, but like our primitive road agreements where we petition people. People go up and down the street, everybody agrees to it, they all sign the paper and date it, So that's pretty much a guarantee they're all going to be on board. But then we have to turn around and get them notarized. So on a process like this, they could just take a simple petition, is what you're saying, that just says, I, so-and-so, owner for whatever the parcel number is, agree, basically.
Correct. We do not require notarization, nor do I run their signature through any sort of voter registration. Our only context for looking at this time is if your name is listed as the parcel owner, as the property owner and the assessor,
Right.
I am making the assumption that you are legally able to execute things related to your land.
So when you go back to the amount of people that you dealt with in the past where, say, I think you said like 90% of it is pretty easily done or
Yes.
could be pretty easily done. So for like 90% of the requests that come through, we would basically be able to turn this around in a 2 or 3 day time frame.
It could be greatly accelerated, yes. If we get a petition that has no dissension, yeah, it could be assigned a couple days.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
third bullet down, it says road renaming still would require public hearing. What I'm hearing is that's a public hearing only if there's a dissenting vote. But otherwise, if everybody's signed an agreement, there is no requirement for public hearing. And I don't know legally if this by state law requires a public hearing.
No, we've chosen the public hearing route just as a matter of course, and that's what I've inherited, so I've not explored too many differences until now.
So that comment, road renaming still would require a public hearing, is not necessarily, it's just what we include in the ordinance.
Correct.
Okay.
The road renaming, I wanted to bring back to be the political process and the public hearing process, because there may be a Main Street. If all the residents, if they wanted to rename Main Street, I was looking at retaining that needing to be a public hearing, because there may be parties that were set that name, and there may be historical context.
So that would just actually be rewrote to reflect that.
Right,
Because you read it now and it just pretty much says everything will be a public hearing.
correct.
And that's a 3-week process. We can't ever get to
Or
what
6. Yeah.
or 6.
Yeah.
Can't ever get to what you as a board or your thoughts are, is that if there's no dissension, let's move this along and not bog it down.
Yeah,
But
not
with
why
that-
slow it down?
Yeah, if all the property owners want to agree to a road renaming, so be it. I wrote these slides at separate times, so there might be some slight disconnects in flow.
Continue.
All right. just make a note for myself. Corner lots. Unfortunately, this has become recently a very little contentious topic. I figured it would make me log back in. There is currently a disconnect between community development's definition of a public lot and addressing's definition, or I'm sorry, of a corner lot. There's differences in that regard. The community development out of their section 102, I had pulled up the 2019 version of their zoning ordinance that's currently up on the website. A corner lot is defined as, the front is defined as the shorter of the two legs of the corner, because you're abutting against, you're against two roads. So from a community development purpose for setback requirements, that sort of stuff, the front is defined as the shorter leg of the lot. Whereas addressing says on a corner lot, I'm more focused on where the front door is for an emergency response perspective. So that can lead to a difference of where front is.
Oh, okay, I may be jumping way ahead, but if we have a parcel of land that's not a lot, like a 50 by 100 lot, say that we have 3 acres. And so the address should be where the owner places their driveway, whether it's a 50 by 100 lot or a 2-acre parcel. Then that way, if we get into addressing and someone that has 10 acres wants to, and there's not a corner road, it would just maybe be where the driveway is?
That's the way the addressing ordinance is at this point. Where the property is accessed, the driveway, the common point. But in Pine, over the last month, there's been a property that's underdeveloped or under development, and where the address has been a item of discussion. So I wanted to bring this to your looking for your guidance. Do we want to match front to front, have the same common definition? The downside is, so community development's definition is tied to fire code and other elements. I don't have that we don't have that restriction with regard to the addressing ordinance, but it does cause it's causing consternation with this particular constituent, and my preference is to not do so, but I want to look to the pleasure of the board. May I provide some additional illustration of that?
Sure.
Okay, let's see here. So in the portals, we have a corner lot. The property owner has the house oriented, so it's mostly near Canyon Vista. I'm not sure if the mouse shows up on the presentation to Young. Because it's a corner lot, this front dimension is the shorter of the two, so the community development has defined this as the front, and that has bearing on their property setbacks and other development activities. The owner has a garage at the back of the property with a driveway that comes across the front and is requesting an address off Canyon Vista. Community development, hopefully Randy's in Well, maybe he's not in, he's in the meeting there. Maybe he's listening in on YouTube or something. Has requested that the address be off Portal Drive to coincide with the community development definition of the front. And so the language front to front works. So their correction to that, because my ordinance says where the front is going to be considered where the property is accessed. Their request to the developer is to put a driveway on Portal Drive for their property and then provide a stairwell up to the covered walkway to the house. The front door is on the back side of the house basically between where the septic field is and the house. That's the primary access to the house. So it could go either way. And I was okay with that until yesterday when I asked for the architect's plans from community development for that. So if you look at this, let's see if I can't zoom this in. This is the right side elevation to the house with the covered walkway, and this is where the stairwell would be. And this is the bare earth. So given this measurement of 25 feet to the roof line, to the upper deck is a minimum of 8 feet. If they level the lot for the driveway and stairs, that's probably going to be closer to 10 feet to 12 feet. Now, I'm no expert and I don't know the development code, but it's my understanding a 10 to 12 foot stairwell is probably going to have an intermediate landing for construction purposes. I don't know if they could construct a stairwell of that height, but it would prove a barrier to emergency response, especially considering if you come over here and there is a breezeway to the back side of the house that's 33 feet away at grade.
Okay. I think we're getting way out of line of addressing, and I appreciate the illustration. But we're not going to get into can they build a 12-foot stairwell or can they build a 14-foot or 8-foot. We're not going to go there. So
Yes, that's a very extreme thing.
Right,
I just wanted to ask if you guys want me to explore that.
I mean, and kind of where my mind is if you're on a corner and you have two driveways, the address is for 911 response.
Yes.
For an ambulance, if you call one, that's where they're going to go, is to your address. And if your address is your driveway off whatever road, where I'm at, if you have a corner and you have an issue like you just showed us where they could have an entrance off of each, what if they need to choose where their address is and gate the second entrance, which wouldn't matter about a stairwell or anything else?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, and some people with a long lot may want to have two entrances off the same road. Or you have to figure a dominant entrance.
Yes.
And your dominant entrance is your address, and your second entrance has to be gated. Or your third entrance.
Yeah, multiple address. There would be a primary address with multiple.
I mean, I'm just trying to keep it simple, and I appreciate you getting into deep depth with a 911 responder. I'm just trying to get them there.
Yeah,
Home Earl, would you go ahead?
Chairman and supervisors, I think the answer is yes. We want both ordinances to have the same definition for what the front of a lot is. And Randy and Tom need to work on that same language and the same definition. It doesn't make sense for us to have a different front definition for a lot in two Gila County ordinances, and we'll work on that.
And I think the developer or the builder or the homeowner ought to do some planning before they choose their driveway for their entrance. Because all of a sudden they want to add a shed. Well, they can't because they just designated the front of their property or the side of their property by designating which driveway they're going to use. So, yeah, then that's, I mean, I can see that creating problems because all of a sudden they want to change it, but they're too close to septic or something of that nature. So I think, you know, that they ought to be aware of once they decide a dominant entrance, again, whether it's a lot or 40 acres, you need to think how you might develop this before you choose an address. Supervisor Christensen, Supervisor Klein.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think that if we make too many rules that ties our hands, that we've made too many rules. So I see a scenario where, by definition, community development calls it the front, but since it's a corner lot, if the terrain does not allow the front to be accessed to a home, and it makes better sense to have a driveway, garage, and build it as if the front was really the side, then that's where 911 needs to show up. If they show up to an address and look up a hill and go, is that the house? Because we're at the right address, but there's no entrance, there's no drive, there's impossible terrain. So they have to go around the corner.
Well, there has to be an entrance in order to get an address. There has to be a driveway in order to get an entrance.
So-
An address, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so yeah, so they're not going to show up they're going to show up at the driveway to the home.
So you're saying then the address would be connected to the driveway, even though you're changing the definition of what a front is?
If we realign the definition from the addressing perspective for a emergency response, you know, yes, they're going to do so. In this particular case, I used it to illustrate because there was a terrain challenge that would create a 911 access challenge. By adhering to the community development, or we remove the definition of front from the addressing ordinance and just say access.
Okay.
And that allows the property owner, the architect, the developer, free rein to develop their property and access their property to their preference, as opposed to a defined front.
Okay. I think I comprende now. Yeah, thanks.
So that's what I would agree with, because, and this is for your district, Steve, too, because you're down to hillside lots in a lot of your district that's going to have different twists and turns to them too. So yeah, that would be good. I think just identify the access point. I know why Randy has the issue with the front.
Right.
You know, I know that, and so if you guys can come together on that, that would be great. Make it work.
And for the most cases, it's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But like you say, you know, in the pine strawberry areas,
Right.
there's a lot of vertical relief.
Most of what's left is up and down,
Yeah.
and so yeah, no, I get it, and so yeah,
So I'm just trying to get the fire truck to the right place in the
absolutely.
expeditious fashion.
Thank you, Tom.
So what would be your pleasure? Obviously, I'll work with Randy. Would you prefer access to be more the way the lot is designed to flow as opposed to the community? My understanding for community development, and again, this is just me, I'm not proposing to speak for them, is it helps define where their setback requirements are. And so, you know, that's an administrative thing, and, you know, if you had a setback requirement, could you apply for a variance on that? I don't know. I don't work in that department.
I would say if there's a structure, there's already an address and already a driveway.
There should be, but this is the.
So if they want to move it, that would be up to planning and zoning and their ordinances and for them, it's not an address issue at that point.
No.
Okay.
This is during the permitting phase prior to construction.
Okay. Yeah, I would say they need to think about where their setbacks and stuff are before they choose an entrance to their property on where their septic tanks and thing are going to be.
Yeah, I'm sure the architect.
Because if
did
there's
that.
already a structure, there's already an address. So they're going to have to put in for a variance or
Right.
easement or change. They're
Yeah.
going to have to go to they're going to have to go to planning and zoning for that.
Yeah. This is only for initial assignment, not existing.
Right. Yeah, I would say that the contractor or the owner of the property, whether they're owner, builder, or contractor, they need to come up with a set of plans with their setbacks and where their address is going to be, because they need to figure out where their driveway is before they even get an address
Yes,
to have their materials delivered, correct?
yes.
Okay.
Well, not really, but yes.
Not really, but yes.
Well, in Pine.
And
they
maybe
could-
on Sunday.
Yeah. In Pine, because this is a defined subdivision, they could have stuff delivered to lot 233.
Yeah, because they've got their own deal
Yeah.
to deal with already permanent structures. Okay,
right.
next.
Moving on. And the Eden Lane that I had alluded to is sort of here, and Cooper Ridge in Young that was recently approved is in a similar situation. Cooper Ridge in Young came about, the family wanted to recognize the family name because they had a store in Young, they helped develop the school, they helped develop some amount of the infrastructure of Young. On Eden Way in Tonto Basin that is currently on hold because we can't come to an agreement, the new property owners were the Edens and wanted to name the road after their family as the new property owners. Looking at the other counties, it's really a mixed bag. Some want to hold, if you want to provide a family name to a road, you need to have some historical context. But every community has the first developers, so this
Okay.
could go either way. I'm just looking for your guidance.
Well, did we not just go through a percentage deal that
Yeah.
they get mailed out and winner take all?
Right. What I guess I'm looking at is, do we want to have a rule that says, for a named family road, you need to have, that name must be recognized as a community thing, or do we not?
Well, I think the whole purpose of this is to shorten things and
Yep.
to make things quicker and better.
Right.
And so I would think if someone has a long family name in the community, that the majority is going to win on what the road name is.
Probably.
And so I don't know that we need to create an ordinance for a family history if that's where we're going.
That's where I was
Okay,
looking.
well, Supervisor Christensen, Supervisor Klein, how do you feel about creating an ordinance for family history?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would not agree to that. I think we should just have the free flow of ideas. If someone wants to name it, Susie Lane, then, why, if we don't have objections to that, why wouldn't we just consider that just as viable as naming it after a historical
Right.
family?
Right. As I said,
Yeah. No,
Supervisor Klein?
Yeah, I don't believe it should be required for a historical name at all. I think it should be up to, working with the people that's involved in what they want to name it for whatever reason. And then there's a process there. If they don't all agree, the process is in place so they can work that out, whatever. So yeah, I don't think we ought to tie our hands behind our backs for historical names or anything like that.
Okay, moving on.
That one's easy. This one, I'm a little apprehensive on. Currently, the penalties in the addressing ordinance are only a hearing officer and really only work to non-display of your house number. In working through the other counties, I found it in Navajo, and then I see my note left off the other one. I think it was Mojave, but don't hold me to that. What I'm seeing is that real estate agents are creating a fictitious address for the purpose of their paperwork. And so the new property owners are saying, this is my address, yet it's never been officially issued. And in talking to the real estate agents, they go, so?
Okay, I mean, I can understand real estate people wanting to do things because it's such a difficult issue trying to get an address at this point that I could see them creating anything they can to get something gone forward. So if someone has to designate a driveway entrance to that property to get an address, I don't know how there could be fictitious paperwork through the realtor.
Well, the best example I can see is the realtor looks at the existing property. There's a house on one side, 210, vacant lot, house on the other side, 230, so they put 220 on their paperwork.
And
Okay, what number would you put on it if they asked you prior to doing fictitious paperwork?
It would depend on how the home design and where the location of the driveway and the property access would be.
Okay, but you're the one that would issue their address, correct?
Yes.
So why would you not do your thought process on entrance and things to tell them what their number's going to be?
Because I don't know how they're going to design the lot. Now then,
Okay, but if they have a house on one side and a house on the other side, then they can only put their driveway off of one road, correct? And it would need to be between those two addresses.
Correct.
So what would you need to give them a number though it wouldn't be a fictitious number from the realtor?
We asked for a site plan that says how is the driveway going to be on the property, and
Okay.
where is the house, where is the front door?
Okay, but
They don't know that typically. They may know that at the time they buy the lot, but they may not know that if they're still designing the home.
okay, and what if they're going to put a fifth wheel on it and not ever build a house? They're still going to need a driveway with an entrance.
They're still going to need a driveway.
And if they ask you for a driveway and an entrance and you give it to them and later it happens to be where their septic tank is, then they're going to have to go for a variance. Because I don't see how we can get them to build the house and do the septic when they haven't even done a perk test yet.
Right.
But they're asking for an address so they can at least get electricity on the property or get a perk test. So by them asking for an address and you give them an address and later they say they don't like where their entrance is, well, they're the one that decided where their entrance to their property was.
Right. Now then, the ordinance does give us the ability to change that address. So if they redesign the lot, that address could be changed. Unfortunately, if you think moving and changing your address is bad, try not moving and changing your address.
Okay, but we can't solve all the world's problems before
Agreed.
we give them an address.
Agreed.
And what if they change it to a two-story? Or, you know, I mean, we could what if until we don't give them an address and they make fictitious numbers through the real estate office. So Supervisor Klein input, Supervisor
Yeah.
Christensen input.
Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you.
Mine might be lengthy.
I think the decision at hand is whether or not we're going to impose penalties.
Correct.
Yeah, I think I'd be against that.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't disagree with that, but we do have to stop the real estate agents from putting these numbers on these properties.
And I think if we were able to get them
So,
an address, they would
well,
have a fictitious one.
I agree, and I think we're on our way to doing that. But what I see is more in your unincorporated rural type areas, and I'm going to use Pleasant Valley as an example because we do things a little differently. But it does cause issues because and Tom's right. You stick a number on a piece of property, and I've seen it several times. This happens, and then all of a sudden, the new owners, they may not even know to ask, is this my address? They just assume that it's their address and run with it. The next thing you know, they're sticking it out there as their address, and they can't get deliveries because it doesn't show up anywhere, yada, yada, yada. And they're in a tizzy. Why? Well, it's because the real estate agent, for whether it's through MLS or whatever it is, just stuck this number on it just because. It would have been better if they had stuck a GPS coordinates on most of them than what they're doing.
Correct.
But they don't do that. I'm not in favor of penalties as far as fining people that have done this, but in some way or another, they do have to stop. And this goes back to the whole idea of the rural addressing from before, is that we needed a way to put addresses on these properties. You know, we needed that. But that doesn't mean everybody that owns a piece of property right now cares to do that. I own, not me personally, but just say I own 10 acres somewhere. It's private. It's vacant land. I'm going to sell it. Am I going to go through the effort to put an address on it before I sell it? No, probably not. I'm going to stick it on the market, and it's going to go down the road. And so that's kind of the dilemma, because in a lot of these areas that I deal with in my district, there is no addressing to speak of. It's, you go to the big rock and turn by the green tree. And so, but then later, when it all comes back around, I'm calling Tom because I got constituent breathing down my neck saying, hey, what you guys screwed up my address. You need to fix it. Well, then all of a sudden Tom's telling me it never was an address. You know what I'm saying? So, but I don't like the penalty idea per se, but I don't have any suggestions for you, Tom, on how we fix that, and maybe this is more Jessica's ballpark than anybody's, but it does have to change. It does need to change. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Supervisor Christensen.
are we going to be fixing some of this in the next presentation here with actually addressing vacant land so that the realtors would have an address on some of that? Are we
Potentially,
Potentially.
but not guaranteed. It could. It is one potential. But what I am taking from this element is that you all are against adding this sort of penalty to the ordinance. Would that be a correct statement?
would be on my account.
I think you're right.
Okay. Yeah, just to close on that for the penalty, I imagine because the language is pretty specific in the ordinance for displaying the house, we could impose the civil penalty potentially against real estate, but I will explore that with outside this meeting. All right. Moving on to the original request of addressing vacant land. just as a element of history, here's the way the ordinance has evolved. And, prior to 1991, the fire departments were responsible for the addressing, so they had their own systems, own methods. Unfortunately, in the modern dispatch age, those methods cause problems for computers that want things nice and orderly. So, Supervisor Klein, moving back to your neck of the woods, this happens to be the church corner of 288 and that 130-acre lot. Our ordinance assigns 1,000 potential addresses per mile of land. So this particular 130-acre lot on 288 in Young is has approximately 3,400 feet of addressing frontage. And the numbers would range from the 48,238 to 48,880, so there's actually about 600 potential even numbered addresses inside that range. So this is where we're looking at, if we do this, I would want to see a site plan, because otherwise, in a 911 call, unfortunately, I didn't VPN into the sheriff's system to be able to demonstrate that. I didn't know what requirements I had on that. In a 911 call, the location of the cell phone comes back, and because there's no structure, because it's a coordinate system based, it's going to look for the closest address to the property, at least on the initial thing before they start talking. The coordinate comes and it comes up on the map as the voice call is coming in. So an address is completely inferred. It's going to look for the closest address point it can be found, and that would be a structure address, an actual physical address, 1400 East Ash. But failing that, if it was on the opposite side of the highway, it would look at the ranging of the highway to say, here's the closest approximate address. Does that make sense? It's the way the back-end system works.
It does make sense to me, Tom. On that particular piece, what doesn't show on there is the other structures on the other side of the road and around on the back, towards the back side of it,
Right.
which depending on where you were in that big parcel of property as to whether or not you're going to go to this house or this house, right?
Correct. Would you like? I can flip over to my desktop and demonstrate if you wish. But if you wish to avoid that rabbit hole.
And the thing of it, Pleasant Valley is a little unique. So let's say there's something happens on the backside of that parcel. Guarantee the neighbors already know it before 911 gets there. So even for us, if they show up at a different house or whatever, it's over here. It's out there by the juniper tree.
Right.
But I know what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And what we need to come to a conclusion here on.
Small lots are largely a non-issue. I mean, there's going to
Right.
be probably an address on one side, an address on the other side, and yeah, we can sort of fake one. Give me a site plan, whether you build or not. I'm not going to go out and check. I don't
Right.
have that time or resource.
So in this particular piece, Steve, this is Dick White's place. Yeah. So this is just a small parcel out of that large acreage that's there. There's other acreage there too as well. But so what you're saying is how would you put an address to this parcel? That's what you're saying, right?
Correct.
And so this is to me, is kind of a little bit of a different scenario. I guess in a way, because the ownership of this property, his main barn and everything is just off of this parcel. So, like, I don't think you would ever see, I'm just using him as an example. I don't think you would ever see him request an address for this. Now, when he sells it, somebody may want to develop it, and then that's when you would see the request for addressing and stuff like that, of course.
Correct.
And that's when you would get into all that highway frontage as well. But what I see more, we're kind of looking at apples and oranges here. Because we know what happens with these large chunks for the most part, they get developed. Okay. But in Pleasant Valley, for an example, and I keep using it, I shouldn't, but there's small vacant properties. It may only be an acre and a half or an acre or whatever else that doesn't have addresses to them, you know.
Right.
Those are the ones that are more of the issue than these larger ones to me right now.
Agreed. I happened to be in the area working
Right.
on another thing and saw that and went, oh, let's
Sure.
use it for an exhibit.
Sure. No, it's good discussion point, but the small ones, and I think our last discussion, we had two of them with you and Young. One of them was Wisdom's up the road, Eddie Wisdom's,
Yep.
and the other one was West Chapman, which was just
Just south of
right there by Tim's Shadow across the highway, basically. Those were both fairly small properties. And that was the issue on those. And so there was fictitious numbers on them, you know,
Yeah.
and that was the issue then. And it was like, you know, we got to have real addresses. But neither one of them had a structure on it. There was no structures,
No, and
you know,
Young being with its unique zoning setup.
like none. We like it.
Yep. Mr. Chapman.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole complete side story I won't go into.
Right.
But yeah, if he would have provided me the site plan,
Mm-hmm.
and what it fell down to was legal access.
It was. Yeah. Which he had both, but
Right.
yeah, it was the access point. So
Right.
But-
and Eddie's once I had lost sight of the zoning nature of Young, so Eddie's was after Mr. Chapman.
right.
So it was a non-issue.
But-
He just called and we talked.
What Supervisor Humphrey stated a while ago, and we've had this discussion in the last meeting, was there are chunks of these vacant properties, whatever size may be, very seldom that size, but that people do want to just trim the trees, pull off the road, and park their RV on. They do want to do that. I'm seeing more and more of that, actually, you know. And then as time goes along, they build and whatever they need to do. And like Tim said, you know, normally I would say when they do that, they already know that for the most part, that's going to be their entryway to the property. Otherwise, why would you have chose it to start with?
Right. I'm not in disagreement with it.
Right.
If as we progress through
Right.
this, give me a site plan so I know how things are oriented.
I don't.
Is the big thing.
Yeah.
So
Okay, if we could get off site plan, especially for rural addressing,
Yep.
and just a plot map,
Right.
not a site plan,
no, you give me a hand-drawn piece of thing that says
but a
my
plot
RVs
map with an entrance.
Show me where the entrance is. Show me where the RV is going to be.
Or how about if they don't know if they're going to have an RV on it yet? How about just an entrance?
Give me a theoretical. I'm not trying to do anything.
Yeah,
I
but
can
but with
validate.
a site map, whether it's a 100 by 100 lot or a 10-acre plot, just show me where the entrance is.
Show me where the entrance is. Show me where the expected vehicle for an because the way
At the entrance. At the driveway. Show me where your driveway is.
Yep.
Is that doable?
it is the way the addressing numbers. So if where the vehicle is going to be, or where some sort of dwelling that emergency response something or other is going to be, it does have a
Okay,
bearing
why,
on the
why
address.
does there have to be a dwelling on it? Why does there have to be a vehicle on it? What if I got 10 acres? I don't ever want to develop. I want to put fruit trees out there. But I want an address so they can deliver my fruit trees because I'm legal to grow fruit trees there. So can I have an address with my entrance so when the truck brings my fruit trees?
Would you have a pump for water? Probably some sort of well.
Well, okay,
Maybe,
wait,
maybe
let's not go there. Okay, I'm hauling my water and I got to have an entrance to haul my water there.
Sorry, I'm just operating.
I understand that. I'm just trying to simplify things and not keep going down these rabbit holes that we can't fix right now.
If I may, if we're addressing driveways is all we're addressing for the most part, where they're going to turn in. Why not
Currently, we
on,
address the structure.
why not on an assessor's map, we know a distance from this property corner to this property corner. They give us that distance. I want my driveway right here. It's 60 foot. We know what it is from the other one. We assign an address to the driveway.
Agreed. That
They want to build later, then we can talk structure, location, and things like that.
if you give me the tax map that has the driveway and preferentially a structure or something.
You keep going back to preference. What if I'm going to grow fruit trees and I'm never going to have a structure there? I'm just going to turn in there. I'm just going to keep these 10 acres.
Yeah, we will have to look. We will have to look at that because the preamble for the addressing ordinance. Sorry, the preamble for the ordinance says an address is assigned to a structure, and that's what we need to work to change. The whole Article 1 of the addressing ordinance says a address is assigned to a structure.
Okay,
or a
how do we
place
get
of business.
structure off of there?
We can look at that.
Because I may not ever want to put a structure on there. It may be a fifth wheel that I move in 6 months out of the year, never going to be permanent. I may want to grow fruit trees. I may want to have cattle there, and I need a place for the vet to come. And he needs an address for me to have my cattle there.
I get you.
So how do we get structure off of there to get rid of all these rabbit holes that we keep running down?
Basically, Article 1 of the ordinance needs to be adjusted.
Let's adjust it.
I would recommend it.
I'm good with that. Next.
So that gets rid of most of the next pages.
Cool.
Let's go to the last page.
That's how we shorten it. Okay.
Fees. So the fees were last updated in 2011. And,
Go ahead.
okay, oh, I thought there was a side something happened. And new addresses, we've never charged for an address, and that includes the initial address, green and white placard. This year, due to everything that's occurred in the economy and everything else, I'm proposing that we increase the replacement address placard price from $10 to $15. The individual numbers, it's a peel and stick thing on a piece of PVC backing. Those used to be 49 cents. They're now $1.02 each. And labor's changed in 10 years. So with your approval, I'd like to look at moving that. Building in the labor and materials costs, it currently costs us about $12 to construct a placard. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go
might I
ahead.
make a comment? I believe that most of our fees or charges for services have not been looked at for a long time. I've asked Finance Department to take a look at countywide, all of our fees, charges for services to determine what the costs of the services are, because by statute, typically that's what we can charge for a fee. And bring that as part of the budget process this coming winter, spring, of what they are, and then have that discussion on overall of what fees, if we want to look at them, if we want to change them, we don't have to, but just so that we are aware of what fees there are countywide and what it is costing us to provide those services and how much we can legally charge for those services. So as a part of the budget process, we intend to bring that to the Board of Supervisors.
And-
Would look at all.
Sure.
Fees
And with the increase in labor and if the increase in things ends up with a percentage that it's just a percentage of increase for our fees across the board could happen to be at some point. And that's what you're working on, as to which this will be a part of.
Yes.
That
it
we
would-
don't necessarily need to go with a direction on a cost today that may come in front of us in the future countywide for what our fees are.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
On that guidance, item tabled.
Are we all getting a warm, fuzzy feeling here?
I will here in just a minute.
Supervisor Klein, do you have a comment?
So I'm going to play devil's advocate. So Jessica owns a house, she pays taxes and everything like that. Why does she need to pay a fee?
That's a decision of the board. There are some things that there's arguments
Sure.
for
Right.
that
Sure.
you're paying taxes, property taxes, whatever, you shouldn't have to pay any more taxes.
Right.
There are by statute that, for whatever reason, that to get a building permit, that's a specific service for a specific individual that is authorized by statute to charge for that service. Same thing with getting an address, that to get an address requires this much labor, this much cost to do it, and by statute, we're authorized to charge for that purpose because it's a specific request. It's not generally providing public safety as we do through the sheriff's office. It's not providing the court system that, yeah, there's some that is a kind of a specific thing, but that hopefully keeps all of us safe. And so it's a general service rather than something that can be specifically identified to an individual.
So I throw that out because that's a question I'll guarantee that it hits all three of us. And I'm not speaking for these two. But I'll guarantee you that the people are out there, that someone may be watching us today, is you want me to pay for what? And so why do I pay that 4.19% on my property taxes? What does that really get me? We hear those questions. We have to answer those questions. And so I'm just throwing that out there that, you know, there's that side of the coin. I mean, after a while, and in a lot of people's minds, it's like, you keep charging me for everything that I want to do for this property. Why am I paying taxes? Because I'm paying for everything else. I think that's a legitimate question.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Klein, absolutely, that is a legitimate question. In my past in government finance, that has been discussed at length. And I know that by bringing this up, it is a legitimate topic for discussion and would be intended to include that. Because really, that is the decision on the board. All the financial implications to the county is a decision of the board. Do we charge for this or do we not charge for this? What is the rate that we're going to set if we do charge anything at all? So we need to have a very deep discussion. It might be a 3-day work session. But absolutely, Supervisor Klein, that we need to include that when we get to that point of having that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You good, Supervisor Christian?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I think I look forward to reviewing all of our fees and not really making a direction on this at this time.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much for your presentation today. I believe me, I thank you very much for looking into things to make it easier for the public and ordinances that were adopted or accepted or written 30 years ago that don't fit our world today. Thank you very much for for your presentation today. I appreciate it very much. And so when we come down to maybe looking at the ordinance, that it needs a structure on it, is that going to be another perhaps work session, or is that perhaps something that can be worked on to be brought to an agenda item that could be tabled if necessary?
We'll have to explore that.
Okay.
You know, if I may just close.
Yes, please.
You know, the addressing ordinance, it's a really unique item because I'm not in the sheriff's office, but yet it has direct impact on law enforcement. And it was originally written to provide emergency response to the exclusion of economic response, such as your fruit tree orchard. So yes, we do need to look at the future.
And yes, we do. And I would well know that if I cut myself with a chainsaw and call 911, I better get to my entrance because that's where they're going to show up.
Yeah.
Not to the back 40 where I cut myself with a chainsaw, but they're going to show up at the entrance to my property, and that's where they're going to be. And I know that when I picked my driveway. And so anyway,
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead.
if I could add to the process that we've talked about it with Tom, is that we need to have a red line copy of what the ordinance is currently. Same thing that we did for HR policies and development, that we
Yes.
can get a red line of what the existing is, what's going to be crossed out, what's going to be added, so that as a board, you can have that detail to be able to review and be able to see on paper where we've been, where we're going, and be able to probably have another work session to go through that red lined copy. Now, Tom, I appreciate you doing this very much. The direction I had from the board was, for something years ago by the Board of Supervisors, was that we need to look at all of our policies because of the reasons that have been stated by the board. So I really appreciate this. I know you have your day job, and that it consumes all of your time. And this is,
We all serve at the pleasure of the board.
yes, we do. But I do appreciate you agreeing to tackle this, and it is a tremendous job. So I really appreciate the efforts that you've put into it and will be putting into it going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we will move on to item 3. Call to the public. A call to the public is held for public benefit to allow individuals to address the Board of Supervisors on any issue within the jurisdiction of the Board of Supervisors. Board members may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. So this call to public would not be on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS revised statutes 38-431.01H, at the conclusion of the open call to the public, individual members of the Board of Supervisors may respond to criticism made by those who have addressed the board, may ask staff to review a matter, or may ask that the matter be put on future agenda for further discussion and discussion at a further date. So, okay, now that everybody has heard that and understood that, we do have a call to the public today, and that's Mr. John Dorenbos. If you would like to come up and perhaps sit in the chair and be sure that the microphone is in front of you, would it be appreciated? And that the green light is on.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. My name is John Dornboss, and I own a property at 228 Mackey Camp Road. Currently, the county is in agreement with the town of Miami in a internal government agreement to resurface, regrade, and maintain the road. I've brought some pictures. There was 6 easements needed, and I don't want to bring up any names, but 5 have signed, and let's identify 11E, which is part of the internal government agreement, that has not signed. Feel free
Sir, you're going to pass out things, please pass them out, but don't speak until you sit back down and.
To the microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to currently pass these pages that I printed off.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So if you look at page 1, and feel free to write on these. You can keep these. I took pictures. I stood in the driveway on the edge of a property that has signed the easement, pointing straight down to 11E. And you can see where the property lines exactly with the post and fence line. The reason this person hasn't signed probably, and is because basically that road, at least 20 feet of it goes right through his front yard, which takes up more than 50% of his front yard. So I see his point on that matter. Now, if you flip to page 2, you'll see a glove in the middle of Mackey Camp Road that I had with me as a marker. That is 25 feet off that property line that I just identified, which I think is more than enough to regrade and resurface this road. The obstacle, if you can follow, there's actually, for some reason when I took the picture, there's a light from above shining right down on my glove. And if you follow that line, that's about the line where the corner needs to be cut tighter. To do that, there is one telephone post in the way. It feeds one property, 11E. It needs to be moved, perhaps to the right. I'm not an expert in alignment for the county, but if that were to be moved, then if you turn to page 3, this is basically that all it needs to be scooped out. You can see the post on the left, the rocks and pile of dirt that would need to be scooped out and removed, and it seems like a fairly reasonable task other than what it would cost to move the post.
Okay. I thank you very much for your address to the board. I thank you very much for the pictures. And Mackey Camp is in my district and has been a difficult, to say at best, situation since I became a supervisor. And I have worked diligently on getting some of these signatures myself. And so I understand the difficulty in the road. I've been on the road. And so I appreciate you bringing your comments to the board today.
Do you have any questions?
Sorry, we can't discuss things that weren't on the agenda,
Okay,
and this
I
was
understand.
not on the agenda. But the reason I read aloud the call to the public is down at the bottom, it says, may ask staff to review a matter or may ask that a matter be put on a future agenda for further discussion and discussion at a further date, as to which I would like to see this information on a future agenda before the board.
That's good.
And so, therefore, I thank you very much.
I thank you for having me. And again, it gets to be like the gentleman before me. the 911, first responders, emergency situations, people that have medical conditions. I'm a diabetic. You can, when you get low on your sugar, it gets to be a hairy situation.
Right, and you're right. That road does need some help, and I appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. And we do have, the road has a name. We do have addresses, so we're there.
Sure.
We're so close to just,
I appreciate that.
getting something done.
And as I said, I asked staff to bring it to to review this information and bring it to a further agenda item.
And it's not just the emergency responders. If somebody has a nice classic car, they can't bring it up there. If they have a nice motorcycle, they can't bring it up there. They got to park clear down off of Route 60 and that, things like that. Whether you're hauling something up in a trailer, a moving truck, a contracting van.
Agreed.
Your tools just fly off every shelf you got inside it, So, all right, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thanks. You have a good day. Thanks.
Moving on to 4. At any time during this meeting pursuant to ARS 38-431.02K, members of the Board of Supervisors and the County Manager may present a brief summary of current events. No action may be taken on information presented. Mr. Menlove, would you care to go first today?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One item I need to bring to your attention, that is the new facility, new compound, new multipurpose facility in Payson. In the next few weeks, we are relocating the assessor and the recorder from those modular buildings, moving them into the new building so that we can demo the trailers that they're in now, so that area on the west side of Colcord can be turned into a parking lot. And so that is happening in the next few weeks here early in December. The delay on everybody occupying that building is the computer chips and things that are required for the HVAC systems. Part of our supply chain deficiencies that we have going in many areas. But that is planned to come in February. And so our intent is, I don't know specific dates. I don't know that we need to get to them, but Joseph has kind of got those dates down. Give a week or two for most elected officials that are moving into their offices to have a chance to move in. So it's like an office and a place that we can conduct business rather than just sterile workstations and stuff like that. So we'll have a week or two for that, so we can do what we need to establish that as a place of business and being able to conduct business with constituents. That'll be sometime in February after we have that time where supervisors or elected officials can have a chance to take care of those matters. Then we will have a ribbon cutting grand opening. So I would assume late in February that we will do that. Want to be able to display the whole building instead of just the very front part where the assessor and recorder are going to be. So that is the plan with the complex in Payson over the next few weeks and then the next couple months. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that information. Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you. Yeah, the building is coming along good, and they just finished all of the paving, so that's all done now. So it actually looks like a complete building right now. I thank you, Tom, today for what you presented. Yeah. I attended an ECO meeting back on the 17th. We're still working on forest health and wolf issues, things like that. Thanksgiving was a pleasure. Hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving, as I did. We had the Swiss Village lighting last Friday, and a lot of people there. I got the electric light parade coming up in Payson on the 4th, and Cameron Davis and Mac Feeser are decorating it. My truck, I got this 71 truck that I thought, well, we'll just use that for Discover Gila. And So they got a hold, they said, we'll help you. And so they grabbed a hold of it and have built something resembling Noah's Ark at this point on my truck that's going to hold TVs and all this. It's pretty great. So I thank them for that. We're going to have to get this ribbon cutting coordinated with NACO meeting in Washington, which I plan on being, and also plan on being at the Game and Fish Award banquet in January sometime. So that's about it.
Thank you, Supervisor Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm gonna let Supervisor Humphrey talk about yesterday more than me, but just real quick, we are putting on some tours through the admin site that's turned into a veterans camp in Young, so that's going on. Also coming up, we're looking at the 17th and 18th, proposedly to hold a sale up there with all the surplus stuff that was left behind from the Forest Service vacating. So we'll start going through the admin site on probably the 13th, Monday the 13th. And so if anybody wants to come up and hang out for a day or whatever and help us put things together, that's great. And other than that, I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. And Tom, I really appreciate the discussions today. Thank you for doing that. That's good. So that's all I had.
So you say the sale is going to be the 17th and the 18th
Friday and a Saturday
of
December.
Thank
you. Yep.
Okay. It's going to be an auction then kind of deal? Or?
You're just going to come up and write a check for all of it and we're done. How's that for a plan, Mr. Humphrey?
Well, I write you a check right now. I just think it'll be very much. Yeah. Yeah, because it would include moving it and loading it. So yeah, it wouldn't be much at all.
We'll be working with Mary on how that's going to go, whether it's an auction or just a yard sale type sale.
That'd be a great thing. First come, first serve. There's a lot of good equipment. Yeah, after touring that, I've heard a lot about it. I've seen a lot of pictures, but it's a whole different atmosphere when you show up in person. And so we got it advertised, and so I was able to go up and tour that with Supervisor Klein yesterday. And 232 acres. What an asset for Gila County in a beautiful part of the world. And I also understand too that maybe for a little while it's going to be a big burden on Supervisor Klein and Kathy, and maybe a bit of a white elephant for the county. But what the opportunity for that establishment will be in the future, because of the structures, because of the settings, because of the things that it can do for the veterans, and create whatever your imagination can come up with for 232 acres. That has the ability to do that, from horseback riding to petting zoos to stays to the gazebos to whatever. It's a fantastic property. And so my hat's off to Supervisor Klein and Kathy Melvin for 5 years of pain and suffering to reach and grab, and trips to Washington to reach out to obtain that. And we're knock on wood, because this is a plastic table, that it does go through and pass legislation. It looks like it all will. We've had a lot of roadblocks, but it looks like all this is going to happen. And so my thanks to them very, very much for the dedication to the constituents of Gila County. And so I'm gonna just leave it at that. And yes, go ahead. Mr. Menlove.
I always have to regroup, I guess. Our intent with the property is to give it a facelift over the next few months, and get it to a certain point and have a reception, a grand opening that we can open the facility up to the public on Pleasant Valley Days, which is later in July. So that is the intent, that we'll use ARPA money to contract out and do what we can over the next few months. Again, having a grand opening reception. Come see what we have here, this beautiful site, later in July at Pleasant Valley Days. Secondly, Steve Sanders has just one thought about the holidays coming up and wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. As you know, in the past, we've had the Christmas bike program at the landfill with the inmates refurbishing bikes. Last year, it didn't happen because of COVID. This year, we have some inmates back. We have a limited number of bikes, and in the past, we have turned it into quite a production, called fire departments, police departments, churches, everyone to come get bikes. We don't have the amount of bikes to do that with this year, but we do have enough to provide each of you with about 15 bikes if you would like that, and then you can hand them out as you feel needed or know people that would like them. If that suits you, we'll make sure that we get each of you 15 bikes here within the next week or two.
Thank you. Supervisor Klein, comment?
No, I think, Steve, that was a really good opportunity for our kids that COVID shut down. So I'm glad we're back on track and gonna get back in that. But yeah, that works for me. I mean, we each know our constituents well enough to put the word out to the ones that really, really need something for Christmas. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We'll get them delivered in the next week to each of your offices.
Thank
The
you.
one in Young?
I don't have room for 15 bikes in my office. Put my name on.
Leave them under the protection they're under, and I'll pick them up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, if that's all, I will adjourn today's meeting. Thank you all very much for being here, and have a safe trip home.
Thank you.